Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. And the return of Kendall Mursky, keeping himself busy with the BF film, or not the BF, not the BF film, the Cover One film room, but making some time for us here on the Air Raid Hour to talk about this exciting,
old habits die hard, right?
Sarcastically exciting free agent class on defense here. And Spin 0481 comes in right away and goes, not many needs on the defensive side of the ball. It's just that it's costly needs, but
there's some truth to that. Yeah.
Hughes, Addison, UFAs, Harrison Phillips, UFA, Levi Wallace, UFA. Like, there could be some big needs if we don't re-sign some guys. So that is what we'll dive into tonight, sort of comparing Harrison Phillips to the rest of the IDL class, comparing Levi Wallace to the rest of the cornerback class, comparing Jerry Hughes to the rest of the edge class, and seeing, like, where do they shake up? When's it best to bring our old guys back? Maybe you can get our guys for cheaper as opposed to guys out in the market, get them, take that Old Town discount, etc. So we will get into all of that tonight, but a couple of Bills related news as we start today. First things first, Saran Neal re-signing with the Buffalo Bills, 3-year deal up to. I got in trouble for commenting on the price tag. I got roasted. I got rightfully so. I was ratioed for jumping the gun and just giving a gut reaction to the $10 million, up to $10 million for Saran Neal. He is the highest paid special teams player in the National Football League, which just continues the trend of the Buffalo Bills showing that investment in special teams is important to them. Tyler Matakevich, Daquan Jones, etc. Interesting note today when Saran Neal was talking to the media, they asked him about the kickoff, and he was like, I'm not talking about it. Like, he's like, I'm not going to tell you guys anything. And we don't even talk about it in the locker room anymore. So, like, he's like, mum is the word. You ain't getting it from nobody. Now, we here at Cover One, Eric specifically, he told you guys what happened. Sean McDermott called the pooch. He called for a short kickoff, and Heath Farrell never told the kicker. Like, that is what happened. There are some people out there who need a Buffalo Bills player or a Buffalo Bills coach or somebody with a little verified check mark next to their name to say they have an inside source to reveal it for them to believe it. But that's what happened. Like, at the end of the day, that's what happened. I personally like the fact that Saran Neal and the Buffalo Bills, whether it's the coaching staff or the players, are sort of towing the company line here and just keeping it within the locker room and getting past it and moving on. What are your thoughts here, Dave? And then we'll go to Kendall for your thoughts.
I mean, how many weeks removed are we now from this? Like, it's time to move on, right? Like, there's no point in, like, whatever cliche you want to use, beating a dead horse, whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, we are over a month removed from that. The 2021 season is over for everybody. The Bills have free agency coming up, draft prep, all this stuff coming up. Like, it's not even worth the conversation anymore. It was talked to death after it happened, even up into the 2 weeks leading into the Super Bowl when there wasn't a lot of chatter as far as news. We were still on the 13 seconds thing, right? So it's like, look, like, let's just put it to bed. Like we did last year when we got blown out in the AFC Championship game. We moved on. We're going to move on from this. It's always going to be part of our history now, this game, this situation. And it's just going to be one of those things that, yes, it's going to sting when it gets brought up, but, like, there's no point in bringing it up now.
Yeah. Kendall, what are your thoughts? Do you think the fans deserve, McDermott sitting there and breaking it down and sort of, shedding a light on it? Do you think the fans deserve the players sitting there and explaining what happened, or should we just all be comfortable and are just assuming that we know what happened?
I think it's understandable for fans to want that answer from someone in-house, but I don't think it's deserved. I think that's too strong. I think if McDermott were to go into a press conference and do something like that, it's just going to open a terrible can of worms where...
What does it change? It doesn't change
anything. It doesn't. It changes nothing. And it would just make fans question other things. And then it's like, now you're just spilling the beans on what's going on internally. You might as well just keep it internal. We know that they're working on it. It's obviously been addressed so far with coaching, carousel hires, all that kind of stuff. They're doing what they can to make sure that stuff like that doesn't happen again. They're addressing it on the inside. We just need to trust that and move on because they've grieved, they've mourned the loss, and it's over. They've moved on. We need to do the same.
Just a couple other news and notes for the Buffalo Bills before we move on to this defensive class here. Training camp appears to be headed back to St. John Fisher. Mike Catalana of one of the Rochester news networks. I'm sorry, I've never lived in Rochester and I didn't write it down. But Mike Catalana of one of the Rochester, their news networks, he does the sideline stuff during the preseason for the Buffalo Bills. He reports that he's got some sources saying the Bills are going to be headed back to St. John Fisher for at least 2 weeks starting in late July. So a little bit of a sense of normalcy there. We'll see how much is actually, open to the fans. Maybe we'll get some Dean Kindig Astro notes back for the first time in 2 years. So that will be really nice. And then last but not least, the Buffalo Bills officially announced a number of coaching staff changes. Nothing was really a surprise. We've touched on most of the things already as they were leaked, but the one big thing that I wanted to point out was John Butler, the cornerbacks coach, is now being promoted to cornerbacks coach / passing game coordinator. And I think that's interesting because, I mentioned on the previous show that I thought Bobby Babich was maybe being groomed to take over for Leslie Frazier in a couple years when Leslie Frazier decides to walk away, moving from safeties to linebackers. A couple people have said like he's an up and coming young coach, but now you got John Butler, who's getting the defensive bump that Ken Dorsey got last year on offense from quarterbacks coach to quarterbacks coach passing game coordinator. And now Ken Dorsey is our offensive coordinator that Brian Dable has left to go to the New York Giants. So am I reading too much into this promotion here for John Butler? Ken, I'm going to start with you.
I mean, probably a little bit, but there's a trend there. You can't fault yourself for looking into it. There is a trend there. I mean, isn't Frazier somewhat old? There's no guarantees that he's going to stick around that long. We know he's still gunning for a head coaching job. And with the way I'm assuming they're going to bring back as many people as possible onto this defense and roster as a whole, I imagine he's going to have some success this season as well. So that could mean a head coaching gig next year. God knows if it wasn't for, the 13 seconds debacle, he probably wouldn't be getting blamed as much for the loss. And, maybe he would have a head coaching job. So yeah, I think it's fair to assume the Bills are doing what they can internally to look for that successor. But I don't know. Maybe it could be Butler, maybe not.
Dave, how about you? Any thoughts on Butler or any of the other different various coachings, mixing and matching and moving around that happened today?
Yeah, and just to clarify, when we say passing game coordinator here, it's defensive.
Yeah.
Passing.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people were confused by that online. It's not offense. So here's the thing. McDermott, what is he known for? Control, having his finger on every sort of aspect of the organization, whether it's personnel, coaching decisions, in-game management, whatever, right? Game planning, whatever. So just like in corporate life, like that I work in, you have to have a succession plan in the instance that you move on or one of your key people move on. And in the NFL, it's trickier, obviously, because it's a high turnover work environment, right? There's people constantly changing jobs. It's not stable as other work environments. So that to the extent you can have at least somewhat of a succession plan, you try to do that, right? And it doesn't mean that John Butler is going to be the next defensive coordinator, but it's a contingency or it's a plan that if all these other variables come into play that are unforeseen, maybe there's an option for him, right, to fill that void. So while we may be reading slightly too much into it, I do think it is a necessary step, I guess, for McDermott in the broader succession planning, right, for that side of the ball.
So one of the interesting notes was Jim Salgado, the nickel cornerbacks coach. When Buffalo is one of the few teams that has not only a cornerbacks coach, but a nickel cornerbacks coach. He actually moved to the safeties coaching position, leaving the nickel cornerback coach position vacant. Now, the Buffalo Bills didn't fill it. Not unusual. Most teams don't really have a nickel coach. That was something unusual the Buffalo Bills did. I went back and double checked. Leonard Johnson is still listed as a coaching assistant on the roster. He was the Bills nickel. He was the Bills Jaron Johnson in 2017. Has those Carolina Panthers connections with Sean McDermott. My guess is he's going to assume some of those responsibilities coaching the nickel corners. but he wasn't given the title. So one can assume, but you never know. And Justin comes in and says, wait, what? Jaron Johnson had his very own.
Well, maybe he
personal
doesn't need that coach anymore. Maybe that was to bring
Yeah.
Jaron Johnson along.
I'm assuming they split the work and then he does,
Yeah.
1.5 jobs where it's like half the
Mm.
nickel coach job and then full safety.
Yeah, and he's always got Leonard fan favorite
Exactly.
from 2017.
He could do half
Leonard
the job.
Johnson to fall back on. All right, let's just dive right into this very meh free agent class. And like I said, one of the things that we're gonna do today is like we're just gonna take Jerry Hughes, we're gonna take Harrison Phillips, we're gonna take Levi Wallace, we're gonna compare them to what's out there. Because if you look at the Buffalo Bills defense, we could talk about some. There's not many, right? Like if you want a whale, you're probably gonna have to trade for him. Like we can talk about going out and getting that difference making edge, but the chances are you're gonna have to draft him or you're gonna have to trade for him looking at this free agent class. And in terms of CB2, it's gonna be Levi, some other veteran who's floating on the market, or again, using high draft capital when you have other needs that you might want to address. So a bunch of different factors that we'll be discussing tonight. Let's just go around the horn and let's start at edge rusher. I'm looking at this free agency class. It's headlined by obviously Von Miller. That's probably someone the Buffalo Bills can't afford. There are the popular name, New York local Chandler Jones, seems to be popular over on the Shout podcast. They had Mike Gesicki from Spot Track, and they sort of laid out a way in which the Buffalo Bills could afford a Chandler Jones, giving him, kicking some of that money into later years where they probably will have to eat it in future years, and only paying him like $8 million AAV in the first year. So it's possible to land a guy like Chandler Jones. But, when we get into discussing it, I have concerns over Chandler Jones and his age and his production for his age. You got Harold Landry and Hassan Reddick, who I don't even have on my list. Yeah, because I don't know really if they fit the 43 and what the Buffalo Bills want to do with their edge rush.
So why are we even talking about
and nor does Von Miller really too. So to be honest with you, by chance, I don't even have him on my list here. Not someone I'm willing to discuss. Emmanuel Ogbah, Melvin Ingram, Justin Houston, Derek Barnett, Charles Harris, Jason Pierre-Paul, Arden Key, Dante Fowler. Those seem to be the names. Frank Clark was just released by the Kansas City Chiefs. So I mean, this is literally the caliber of edge rushers we're talking about in this class. Dave, I'm going to start with you because I know there's a guy you want to talk about.
Yep.
Who's the headliner of this class to you? Who would be a whale or a semi-whale that you would like to chase if there is one at that?
I don't disagree with by chance, by the way, that Landry headlines the class, but I'm also having to think of this from a fit perspective for the Bills, right? Guys like Derek Barnett, guys like Harold Landry, guys like Von Miller, I don't see them as fits as edge rushers in the Bills defense. Those are more 3-4 outside linebacker type guys. So to me, the whale, if you want to call it that still has that sort of youth on his side, if you will, is Emmanuel Ogbah, right? And he was the number 20 ranked edge rusher for PFF in 2021. He's had 9.5 sacks each of the last 2 seasons. And from a fit perspective, he would fit. He would be the splash guy that you would sign to more than a 1-year deal, right? Yeah, you can try to make it work with Chandler Jones, but it's going to be a 1-year deal. You can try to make it work maybe with like a Jason Pierre-Paul, but it's going to be a 1-year deal. Ogbah is the guy that if you're trying to invest like a 3-4 year contract into, he to me would be the headliner, but he's probably going to garner somewhere in the range of $15 to $17 million a year, I would imagine, on the open market. So while he is a headliner, I don't know that it's a realistic option for the Bills. And so while I would put him as my headlining guy, if you were going to kind of pick a guy that could be a fit and a guy that you can invest multiple years in, I just still don't know if the Bills are going to be willing to do that. And that's why I said on my tweet yesterday, like, there's a very select few guys that you'd be willing to put top dollar into, and he might be one of them. But honestly, the rest of the edge class, like you said, it's kind of meh. And it kind of brings back the question of like, are we better off bringing back one of Hughes or Addison on a sort of veteran type not minimum, but like a veteran type deal for 1 year, and then looking elsewhere in the draft or otherwise. But Ogbah is the headliner. I have some other names. We'll get to those in a second, but he would be the headliner for me.
Yeah, and just a clerical error here. Anthony Hitchens was cut by the Chiefs, so I misspoke with Frank Clark. I'm guessing Frank Clark's going to get cut.
Yeah,
His production
contract.
versus his salary. One can assume that he's going to be a cap casualty, and there's some other ones that when we get to free agency part 2, like the couple days before free agency, after some more cuts come in, he'll be someone we discuss. Someone by chance mentions Randy Gregory. I mean, again, this is a guy who's got some decent pass rush explosiveness, but you question his ability in the run game, and whether you like it or not, some of these guys, are the Bills going to have interests in someone who really only has interest in rushing the passer and not playing run defense? I just don't know. So, Kendall, what are your thoughts on maybe some of the people at the top end of this free agency class, and anyone you think the Buffalo Bills would try to chase, looking for that alpha?
For me, the top dog where there's like a cross section between big whale and realism, I kind of keep coming back to Melvin Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
PFF has him at $8 million average annual value. Perfect timing with the comment. He's good. He's kind of, you're paying for the name a little bit. He does have some production. And he floated around from team to team last year. So you kind of wonder, like, is it a him thing with his production on the field? Is it a him thing with his attitude? Is he not willing to take a backup type of role? So I have questions in that regard. He had a ton of pass rushing snaps. He was 22nd despite not getting a lot of opportunity in Pittsburgh. And then once he went to Kansas City, he got a lot more. So he's 22nd in pass rush snaps and 23rd in total pressures with 51, but he was only 40th in pass rush win rate at 14.8%. And I mean, we'll get into Jerry Hughes and I'll break down how Jerry Hughes was better with less snaps. But yeah, I kind of keep coming back. Like, do we really want to pay someone for their name versus pay someone like Jerry probably a little bit less? And he knows the system and he knows what's going on in town. So that's kind of what I keep coming back to with like the higher priced guys. I just kind of keep coming back to the vet and Jerry.
Yeah. Silas Whittle comes in, says Arden Key of the 49ers. You know, he really came on this year, had good pass rush production, but 1 year of pass rush production. And he's another guy where his run defense is questioned. His ability to finish plays is questioned. So while Arden Key came on a very good San Francisco defensive line, in free agency, are you willing to go pay Arden Key $8-9 million when there's only 1 year of proof in the pudding and questions about his ability to finish plays and play run defense? I'm not sure if the Buffalo Bills are interested in making that connection. I mean, I just keep coming back to, like, I had Melvin Ingram highlighted. Like, he was the name I had highlighted. I think Agba is the guy I would chase because I think he gives you stuff as a run defender and a pass rusher. I truly believe that Emmanuel Agba could be our Trey Hendrickson. I think he is a fit here. And I really do think if we can get our hands on him, if we can convince him to come here for like $11-12 million, maybe if he doesn't get up into that $15-16 million range, if we can keep him closer to 10 to 12, I think Emmanuel Agba is in play. And I think Emmanuel Agba is that guy who could come in, slot him on the right side, Rousseau on the left side. You got Basham and Epinesa coming off the bench, and you got yourself a nice little rotation there. Yeah. And I think Agba just fits with what the Buffalo Bills did. He was my number one free agent 2 years ago, you know, to replace Shaq Lawson. So he once again ends up as my number one free agent again. I've just always liked the guy's game, and I think he would be a fit here. But again, he might price himself out of what the Buffalo Bills can afford. You know, Chris Janke mentions Jacob Martin. I mean, Jacob Martin's just a rotational guy. There's a couple of guys at the bottom. Jacob Martin, a rotational guy. You know, Kamiko Toure of the Colts had 5.5 sacks this year. Former high draft pick. He's been hurt a lot, but again, provides little in run defense, just like Jacob Martin provides little in run defense. He would be a situational pass rusher. So if the Buffalo Bills find themselves at the end of like a week or two into free agency and they can't land an edge rusher and they're just looking to add a dude, they might like, all right, well, Epinesa can stop the run. Basham can stop the run. Rousseau can stop the run. Maybe we'll go out and get a specialized edge rusher, you know, for $4 or $5 million, like a Toure or a Jacob Martin. But guys like Melvin Ingram are the ones that I hone in on. But then I ask myself, Melvin Ingram will probably cost you $8-9 million, maybe even more than that. Kendall, you wanted to talk a little bit about Jerry Hughes. You could probably convince Jerry Hughes to come. It's a weak edge class, so maybe not. Maybe Jerry Hughes is chasing one more bag, but maybe you can convince Jerry Hughes to come back here for one more year at like $6 million, right? As compared to what you'd have to pay a Melvin Ingram. Talk about how you think, Kendall, Jerry Hughes might be a more effective pass rusher than really most of the guys on this list, at least bang for your buck wise.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It comes down to bang for your buck. And I mean, Spot Track has him at 3.3 and PFF has him at 6.5 AAV. I feel like coming back to Buffalo, knowing what he means to this team, means to this locker room, and what he means to the rotation in general. I mean, I think he's willing to come back for less than 6.5. I could see him dropping down to like 4.5, 5 range. And that's a lot of bang for your buck. He was 46 in pass rush snaps with just under 400, but he was 18th in total pressures with 55 and 13th in pass rush win rate. He was really incredible with the rotation that he was working in. He really didn't get a lot of opportunities to shine, but when he was on the field, he was productive. And that's really all we're asking for. So yes, I agree with you. I think Ogba definitely is the most attractive guy out there to add to this room because he really does fit exactly what the Bills want in a edge defender. But I do think we need a pass rushing specialist. I think with this rotation, I think we have good, solid to good run defending edges. I think having a specialist that comes down on pass downs would be huge. And I think in the late stages of his career, I think Jerry Hughes is perfect for that. Once we get to sleepers, I'll bring up my other guy.
And then the one guy here, speaking of sleepers, Shaq Lawson.
Yeah.
Rotational guy. You know, he's a guy who there were some rumors and rumblings that he could have came back before the season was over. Didn't happen, but maybe it happens now in the off season. I mean, he's just a guy you throw into that rotation who can come and compete, but you're obviously not going to be a guy like Shaq Lawson's probably getting like a 1 year, $2 million deal, no guarantees with incentives. Like seems like the kind of guy who's not going to be getting much. So he might be a guy who might try to come resurrect his career back where, it all started and where he got that contract from the Miami Dolphins. But Dave, any final thoughts on defensive ends? And then we'll go to Kendall with some of his bargain guys that he likes.
Yeah, I mean, like as I was going through the defensive ends and like outside of like Ogba and maybe Ingram, like all the guys that I saw as potential fits for the Bills, like Kendall said, is like kind of like pass rushing specialist type guys who are at the tail end of their careers, who would be better served playing in a rotation. Guys like Justin Houston, right, who's played in a 4-3 and a 3-4, was in Baltimore last year, played about 60% of the snaps, still had 4.5 sacks. Guys like Everson Griffin, who've played in a 4-3, had 5 sacks last year. These are guys that are older, right, in their mid-30s. They would come in as a rotational guy. You could likely get them for, Everson Griffin, you could get probably for under $2 million a year.
He had that situation where he had a situation where he locked himself in the house with a whole bunch of guns. So I think that he might be off the list.
Maybe that's out. But Houston could be a fit. Potentially. He's played in both types of systems.
Dante
Fowler is another one. I mean, like I said at the very beginning, if you really wanted to bring a guy like Jason Pierre-Paul in for like a 1 year, $2 million, $3 million deal, he didn't grade out very well, by the way, last year.
Yeah, he was hurt with that shoulder.
Yeah, he's really in the decline. And then a lot of the other guys are really more 3-4 fits that I saw, like Barnett and that type. So for me, it is a very weak edge class as far as fits for the Bills. So I keep coming back. I'm like, hey, bring Brian Cox Jr. back on like a no guarantee deal. Bring F.A. Obata back if you need to, and like bring Jerry Hughes. Just get the bodies back in the room to free yourself up, at least to give yourself options when it comes to the draft. And then maybe if you want to go and get into play for an Ingram and an Ogba, that bringing guys like, Cox Jr. and Obata back don't stop you from doing that.
Yeah.
Kendall, who are maybe some of these bottom bin guys? I know By Chance here likes Lorenzo Carter. I've always thought of him again more as a 34 guy than a 43 guy. Who are some of the guys that you have your eye on if the Buffalo Bills are just looking to add to that rotation?
All right. So the guy that I'm like most intrigued by, he's a rotational pass rushing specialist. Like I really only expect him to be on the field in pass rushing situations. It's the Rams Ogbonnia Okoronkwo. I think I got that right.
I actually had him highlighted.
The thing with him is he's only 27 and he's truly just a pass rushing specialist. He doesn't, what is it? He has like
Nothing more than 300 snaps. Yeah.
He has like 600 total snaps in the 4 years he's been in the NFL. So it's like he doesn't have a lot to his name, but I'll go through the stats in a second for how productive he was on limited snaps this year. The thing that I find interesting is he just won a Super Bowl. He was very much part of that. Like he was productive this year. PFF has him at 2.25 million AAV. I feel like he's probably going to get paid more because he's only 27. I feel like he's going to get a chance.
Supply and demand, man. Not a lot of young guys in this class. To
I checked his RAS score. It's above 8. He's just a little bit stouter. He's not the tallest and lankiest. So I think that could hold him back in some ways. But he's super athletic. He can bend around the edge. He can do some stuff as a pass rusher. So he had 150 total pass rush snaps, and he was 22nd in pass rush win rate, which combines like your total pressures relative to the amount of snaps you had. So that's 22nd. That's ahead of Melvin Ingram, who had a hell of a lot more opportunities to do more. He had like a fourth of the snaps that Melvin Ingram had and had half the pressures. So he's not anything like crazy. Expect, 6 sacks from him this coming year, but he's someone that's intriguing to add to the rotation and use as a rotational pass rusher. The last one is Takk McKinley, though. I'm very interested to see what Takk McKinley could do.
Will he be ready to start the season, though? Towards ACL week 15. So he might be a guy that might not get a contract until into next season or into training camp. Yeah,
exactly. But that's one of those bargain bin guys where it's like you could get him cheap. He was productive when he was on the field last year, and he was in a rotation behind guys like Clowney and Garrett. So, and they play it's a wider front, but a similar front to the Bills. So, those two guys are interesting to me as bargain guys, but I keep coming back to Jerry Hughes. I think that's what we need, a veteran presence in that room for the young guys.
Give me Jerry, give me F.A. Obata, re-sign Harrison, and go get me a CB2, and then we can just hit the draft from there. I mean, I'm going to give a little bit of a take here when we get to IDL, but like Rousseau, Epinesa, Basham. I made this comment the last show. It's kind of like the movie The Other Guys, right? Mark Wahlberg. I'm a peacock. You gotta let me fly. Like at some point, we gotta sink or swim, dudes. Like
that movie's always on TV too,
and it's scary. It's scary because we're in this championship window, right? And pass rush is such an important part of being successful in the National Football League. You see all of these teams, like Kansas City has swung so many times, whether it was Justin Houston, then it was Frank Clark, and then it was, Melvin Ingram. Like everyone's always swinging for those edge rushers. Yeah. And the Buffalo Bills just haven't. They've just stuck with like Jerry Hughes. And they paid Mario Addison a ton of money, but I wouldn't call it a swing. They drafted Rousseau in the first round, drafted Epinesa in the second. You just got to let these guys fly, see what they got. There's something to be said about development when you look at how much better Ed Oliver's gotten over the course of his career, or how much better Levi Wallace has gotten over the course of his career, or Ryan Bates. But then there's the Cody Fords of the world. It's like, well, is AJ Epinesa going to be Ed Oliver, or is AJ Epinesa going to be Cody Ford? Like, where's his development going to go, or is it going to be somewhere in between? Like, that sort of uncertainty scares people a little bit. And I think that's where we fall into the crutch of free agency. Like, let's go get someone who's done it before. Yeah. But I think the Buffalo Bills might be better off sticking with their 3 young guys, bringing back, as you said, Obata and Jerry Hughes. I like Mike Love. I think he has an opportunity to actually finally crack this football team, especially if we don't bring F.A. Obata back. If we don't bring F.A. Obata back, we go with 5 defensive ends again.
He's on the
Mike
team.
Love has a chance.
He's got an advantage. He's on
He's here. Yeah. He exists. But I do think, and this is a point you were on the show, I believe, when Eric made this point, and it was probably one of the most poignant points of the offseason, and it's something that's really stuck with me since I watched it over there in the Cover One film room. He said the Buffalo Bills need more 2-gappers, like the defensive tackles. That spine of this defense appears to be some of the issues with what is going on, whether it's not freeing up Tremaine Edmonds or Matt Milano to be the best version of themselves, or getting the Buffalo Bills in trouble when they go nickel because Jaron Johnson's out there and the defensive tackles just aren't doing their responsibilities and people are able to, run up the gut on us, etc. I look at Vita Vea a couple of years ago, I've used this as an example of a defensive tackle who might not show up on the stat sheet, but does so much for the defense. Like Vita Vea made Jason Pierre-Paul's life so much easier and made those linebackers' lives so much easier. And he did a lot of stuff, even though he didn't put up statistics. I want Harrison Phillips back as much as the next guy. And you mentioned before the show, like, I'd like Harrison Phillips back and I'd like to draft a guy. If we're going to draft a guy, I want an early guy. Like, I want a Devontae Wyatt.
Yeah.
I want a Jordan Davis. I want a Travis Jones.
Especially if Phillips is brought back.
Yeah, even with Harrison Phillips, I want them. But there's no guarantee you're going to get your hands on any of those guys, especially with Devontae Wyatt now moving up boards, Jordan Davis already probably being out of the Buffalo Bills' reach. Do you reach for Travis Jones? Can you get back up in the second round to get Travis Jones? Like, there's all this uncertainty surrounding those guys. I wouldn't mind signing Harrison Phillips and then investing more money in a second defensive tackle in this free agency class, because there's so many of them that I think you can get a dude. I think you can get a dude on a rather cheap deal, and you could have Harrison Phillips, Ed Oliver, and another veteran free agent. You just got to make sure that veteran free agent doesn't turn into Vernon Butler. You got to swing and you got to hit with that other veteran defensive tackle you sign. But there's a lot of dudes I like in this, free agency class, and your boy Lettuce coming in with his usual super chat. We always appreciate it. You can significantly improve a bend or don't break defense with a punt god, Matt Arazia. So we're gonna get to punters at the end here. None in the free agent class that I like. But I don't know, Dave. We'll start with you. Who sticks out in the defensive tackle class? Is there anyone who sticks out to the point where you're like, I want that guy more than I want Harrison Phillips?
No, not more than I would want Harrison Phillips for when you take into account the kind of money that you probably can get away with paying Harrison Phillips. Like, I like guys like BJ Hill, I like guys. I mean, but BJ Hill is going to, he's probably going to demand like north of $7-8 million a year would be my guess. So when I start thinking about Harrison Phillips and thinking, well, maybe, maybe we can get him back for somewhere around the $5 to $6 million a year range. That's where I keep coming back to. And then you start looking at some of the statistics around Harrison Phillips and you say, well, he was like the number 15th ranked interior defensive lineman per PFF in 2021. And you kind of look at that with his age and you're like, okay, he's only 26. Some kind of incentive laden deal might make sense for him, given, he's had the major injury in the past. But like, I would say that, an incentive laden deal for Harrison Phillips that maybe starts in the neighborhood of $5 million a year and can work its way up would make a lot of sense for the Bills. And I would say one thing probably working in the Bills' favor in this situation is exactly what you said. There are a lot of pretty good defensive tackles available in free agency. And while Harrison Phillips is, one of the younger ones and more promising ones, he does have the injury, history. And he is in a position, if he were to return to the Bills, to have a very prominent role. So I think that works in the Bills' advantage. And I think if they were to do right by him and give him, a good amount of money, but add some incentives on top to just say like, hey, look, we want you to kind of continue to progress and you can kind of reach this ceiling of earnings, it would make a lot of sense for them to bring Harrison Phillips back.
Yeah, I mean, and Gabe comes in with a super chat for 99 cents. We appreciate the super chat there. And he says, he also said, where did that comment go? Don't sleep on Jaron. Yeah, Jaron Reid from Kansas City. We're trying to sign him last year. You guys spoke about Jaron Reid a little bit in the film room last night, I believe. I haven't had a chance to catch it yet. What do you like about Jaron Reid's game? He seems like a 3-tech to me, and I'm more interested in some of those beefier guys who could be versatile to be 3-tech and 1-tech, or just 1-tech guys. That's just where my mind is right now. I mean, I have 2 3-techs on my sort of my sheet of free agent wants, and they're like lower end, like upside guys to maybe sit behind Oliver. Where do you stand on Jaron Reid here?
Yeah, I think he would be a shade more towards a 3-tech build and type of player, but he has the strength. He's definitely capable of playing 1-tech. I don't know if I'd be sold on him being our primary 1-tech. Like, he would probably be one of those guys that you were talking about. It might be a little rich for our blood, but like you were talking about, if we bring back Harrison Phillips, he would be a guy that could then split the difference between Phillips and Oliver and replace either of them, whatever the Bills defense wants to do with that interior rotation. But the other guy that I like from the group that that Eric pointed out as like a little honorable mention at the end of our show was Derek Nottie, his running mate in the interior.
I want Harrison Phillips and Derek Nottie. I mentioned
yeah, like that's a very good tandem where it's like you get yourself the bigger run stopper, and Harrison's probably the guy that offers more pass rushing chops, and you can get probably both hopefully under 10
under
mil.
6. Yeah.
I'm thinking like
maybe combine
them like maybe under 10 is probably pushing
even
that.
If you're kicking money into the future, like next year, the year after, they might cost more than 10, but in year 1 you could probably get them.
I'm kind of thinking like Harrison's going to get a ton of non likely to be earned guarantees. That's just kind of like Tilt was saying, we could probably get him on the cheap because of all of those factors that work towards the Buffalo Bills in negotiation. Then you throw in those non-likely to be earned guarantees. There's probably a way to get him and Nottie under, I'll say 11 million combined. And then that's when you go and attack another 3-tech in the draft. And in that case, I wouldn't even feel so bad about waiting till the 3rd round to do it. Because obviously Harrison,
guy like
Phillips
Thomas Booker from Stanford or something then comes into play.
Yeah, and he put on some weight, so we know he can, he can fluctuate his weight a little bit and hopefully get between 3 or 1 tech, whatever the Bills want him to do.
There are a couple of, I think, bargain bin 3-techs too. Like I like Taven Bryan, who was mentioned in the comment section. He flashed in that Bills game, gave the Bills a little bit of trouble. He was a former 1st-round pick who sort of hasn't panned out. Ton of upside there. Maurice Hearst from San Francisco, a guy who
interesting.
Always liked.
Yeah,
he's like an Ed Oliver clone to me. Like he'd be like a perfect guy to have behind Oliver.
The Ed Oliver clone that I was thinking of was Bilal Nichols from Chicago. He's kind of meh, but he's the perfect kind of guy you would throw in as a rotational 3-tech behind Oliver.
Yeah,
that's all you need. You need someone who's just going to be sufficient.
In like the Quentin Jefferson mold, I like Jalen Holmes from the Saints. I've always been a big fan of Jalen Holmes since his days at Ohio State. I really like him as a far bottom end of the barrel thing there. But Tim Settle from Virginia Tech is another interesting one. Very nimble for his size. Like he's a pretty decent pass rusher for a guy his size. Very powerful. Tim Settle is a guy from the Commanders. He was a defensive tackle for Tremaine Edmonds at Virginia Tech. But I mean, we mentioned, right? If Harrison Phillips prices himself out and leaves, I'm liking some of the defensive tackles that could come in. Foley Fatukasi from the Jets is a favorite of mine. We've mentioned Derek Nottie, Sebastian Joseph Day of the Rams, Daquan Jones of the Panthers. Like, even if you're looking just on a 1-year deal, Linval Joseph of the Chargers, Austin Johnson of the Giants, like Corey Peters of the Cardinals. Like, there are some dudes out there. I know that it is weird. I've like a lot of the Commanders. I liked a lot of the Bengals free agents last year. It's weird. It's definitely not normal. You guys talked about Austin Johnson a little bit last night, correct?
No,
you guys didn't talk about. No. I think Anthony Prohaska has been talking about Austin Johnson a little bit of the Giants and playing some of his film. Really likes his abilities as well. So he's a sleeper free agent there too. So Richard Rush says Harry isn't going there. I tend to agree, but you just never know, man. Yeah, you never know.
My thing is, I really feel like because like we literally just ran through the position, there's so many, it can play to our advantage where one's going to slip through the cracks and we can get one on the cheap. But I think the key is that the Bills go hard for Harrison Phillips early and make it clear to him that he's the priority. So he understands how much he has value in Buffalo and how much he's going to be a part of this team. And once you get that locked up, you just find whichever one you like best who falls through the cracks here, because there's going to be a lot.
Yeah, we got By Chance coming in saying Larry Ogunjobi changes his team. I don't know if the Bills chase an Alpha 3-tech when they already have an Alpha 3-tech. I just don't know if that's something the Bills are interested in doing. That's why Ogunjobi never made my list. But if they're going to chase someone, and we're going to get to Justin Zimmer in a moment because a couple of people have mentioned Zimmer here. Calais Campbell, Akeem Hicks. I know Campbell's on his last legs. And Ndamukong Suh said he never played for a cold weather team, but he always sticks out to me. So Campbell, Suh are guys out there. But what about Akeem Hicks? What do you guys think about Akeem Hicks as a possible option? It seems to be like a fan favorite.
I mean, I wouldn't hate it, but it depends on how much you're going to pay him, right? Yeah. I just I see a lot of. I would say this: if you bring back Harrison Phillips, I'm okay with maybe you going with Akeem Hicks as as a 1-year deal type of guy to just plug that sort of backup role for just 2022. But there are too many guys I think I like that you could invest 2, 3, 4-year contracts into who have youth on their side that in this class, there's just in this free agent class, there's so many guys I like that I would almost I wouldn't be mad about Akeem Hicks, but I would also be like, man, we missed out on some potential youthful options if we go that route.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, Kendall, what were your thoughts on Hicks?
No, I actually didn't have much on Hicks.
I mean, I just look at it too. Some people are mentioning Justin Zimmer in the comment section. I feel like he's probably going to come back RFA. My guess is they're not going to tender him. They're going to let him test the market, and then they're going to bring him back for less than what the tender would be. I don't think they're going to pay him the full $1.8 million or whatever the tender would be for Justin Zimmer. So they'll likely get a deal with him short term, and he'll come in and compete to be defensive tackle 4 or 5, right? It's going to be him. It's going to be Brandon Bryant. It's going to be Eli Anku. It'll be interesting to see because if Harrison and Oliver are back, they're the 1-2. If we sign a guy, you got your 3, or if we draft a guy, you got your 3, and then Justin Zimmer just becomes a part of that sort of competition there. I don't have higher hopes for Justin Zimmer than defensive tackle 4.
Yep, that's the ceiling. That's his ceiling.
To me, that's his ceiling. It's just a really good rotational plug-in guy who, if a couple of guys get hurt, he can start once in a while. But to me, Justin Zimmer is not going to solve any problems on this Buffalo Bills defense. He'll just play a role towards the bottom half of the depth chart. Any thoughts on any of these defensive tackles before we move on to linebacker?
The one that, for whatever reason, for years, I've always liked his game. Never done a deep dive into his film or anything. I've always liked Malik Collins. I feel like if we didn't get Harrison Phillips, that'd be someone I'd consider chasing. The problem is I'm not sure if he's ready to be a true starting defensive tackle, but he'll be 27 by the start of the season. The thing that scares me the most about is it kind of just feels like a Vernon Butler signing where you're signing a guy with some youth on his side for $8 million.
Yeah, I have no interest in Malik Collins personally, but
I didn't have on my list because he just screams 3-tech to me. And if we're going for a 3-tech,
you don't want it to be that expensive.
I don't want it to be that expensive.
Yeah.
What about? I mean, Kendall. What about Daquan Jones? You guys did film room on him, right?
we talked about Daquan Jones. He's definitely a guy that can be had cheaper. I think he's
30 years old.
He's 30 years old. I feel like the thing with him is, are you signing him if you can get Harrison Phillips back, or are you signing him to replace Harrison Phillips?
Replace him probably.
Because I don't know if I feel but if you're replacing him, do you really feel good about it? Because then you really have to draft a 1-tech higher than you'd like.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
So that's kind of my thing with Daquan Jones. It's kind of like a value tweener.
But he is 30. I mean, I could see him getting a 2-3 year deal.
He could be a guy that falls through the cracks too.
Yeah, maybe we get him towards the end of the free agent market for cheap, right? We can get him for $4 million to come in and be DT3, but he's not that versatile guy who can go back up at Oliver too. So then you
that's
really
probably
need
why
another 3-tech. Yeah.
That's why he could slip through the cracks. I mean, people aren't going to give big money to 2-down defensive tackles.
Yeah.
Unless you're really good.
All right. So moving on to linebacker now. I think we can all just talk about guys that we like. And I think we can make this a short 3 or 4 minute conversation. Obviously, Tremaine Edmunds is back. Matt Milano is back. AJ Klein will be interesting to see what they do. My prediction is that my guess is they end up restructuring or extending AJ Klein to lower that cap hit in 2022. I think they do the same with Tyler Matakevich, lower that cap hit. And I mean, when you're talking Edmunds, you're talking Milano, Klein, Matakevich, Andre Smith, Tyrell Dodson, Joe Giles Harris. You're 7 deep.
Yep.
I think this is a position that sees little turnover. Heading into next season, I think the only changes you would see is if AJ Klein books and they replace him with a draft pick because they want to hedge their bets for Tremaine Edmunds, or they draft a guy in the mid to late rounds who comes in and beats some of these bottom feeder guys on the roster, like a Tyrell Dodson or a Joe Giles Harris or an Andre Smith. That's about it in terms of linebackers. I don't really see a market in free agency, but if there's any guys you want to talk about, and your boy Lettuce comes in and says, if we use Edmunds as trade bait to go up and get Davis Watts, we can look at Jaylen Brown out of Tennessee to be the new Mike. My issue here is if you're using Tremaine Edmunds as trade bait to go up and get Jordan Davis or Devontae Wyatt, you want to know Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt are on the board. So you want to make that trade on draft day. You don't want to make that trade until you know you got the player you want to get. And then you'd likely use pick 25 for Nakobe Dean or Devin Lloyd, but you'd also want to know that Nakobe Dean or Devin Lloyd are on the board. Like, so there's just so many variables about trading Edmonds for a draft pick and going cheaper and stuff like that. So I just don't know if you trade Tremaine Edmonds before you get the guy you want when you trade him.
Even if you trade him on draft day, is that really an economical move for 2022? I mean, that's basically saying like, we're going to basically try to save, $12-13 million in 2023. That's what you're saying when you do that. And you're basically saying we're willing to start over at middle linebacker, take the lumps with this rookie or whoever we end up drafting. And we're just going to live with it because we're more interested in saving, like not having to make the decision whether we want to pay him $12-13 million.
I have one Tremaine Edmonds trade take, and I've been sitting on it, and I know everyone thinks I'm a Edmonds dreamist, so this is me showing I'm not going to stand him to no ends. I would consider this. If the Bills are on the clock at 25 and say it's both Dean and Lloyd are on the board, that way the Bills have their pick. I don't know which one they like more. Say the Giants come calling, or some team that's at the top 5 picks of the second round comes calling, and they're like, we'll give you our pick in this slot for Edmonds. And you're like, okay, at 25, we know we can get Dean or Lloyd, and we get to take potentially the guy we wanted at 25 the whole time with that pick that we just traded Edmonds for. Yeah. So that's like my one situation where I'm like, I'd consider this. Otherwise, I don't want to create the hole and have to deal with the development of a Mike Lyons linebacker.
The only trade scenario I like is if Nakobe Dean and Devin Lloyd are sitting on the board at one of the 3 Eagles picks, and you call up the Eagles, and the Eagles are willing to make a swap, right?
Because then you and get it.
You go up and get the linebacker to replace Edmonds, and then at 25 you get your guy at your original pick.
You'd probably have to trade like a third or something like that on top of.
I don't think so.
Up there, you don't think so? Because they don't value.
But that would be.
They have 3 of them.
But to me, that's the trade with the Eagles. Like, you either like this guy who you think is a annual all pro middle linebacker who's 25 years old, or you don't. Like, take your pick. And if you do, we're offering you a guaranteed, consistently Pro Bowl middle linebacker for this much money. But here's the thing, and this was the conversation we had on the salary cap show when I sort of proposed it. Who the hell cares who your middle linebacker is if you don't improve the dudes in front of them? Like, the defensive tackle play needs to get better, right? So as hard of a time as we want to give Tremaine Edmonds, like, yikes, that play in front needs to get better. The Buffalo Bills need to get better at 2-gapping. The one guy whose name, and I don't mean to get too much into draft talk here, like Fedarian Mathis just sticks out like a sore thumb as someone that the Buffalo Bills are probably absolutely in love with, who they're just going to want to come in here and plug right behind Harrison Phillips and have two gappers right in a row there on the depth chart with that Oliver playing 3-tech. But I mean, that's about it. I mean, what are some linebackers out there? Mine was, if we cut AJ Klein, I have the name Josh Bynes on my list. He's a 2-down run thumper who plays really good special teams with the Ravens. Like, you can probably get him for $1.5 million. He was even with the Buffalo Bills a couple of years ago during training camp for a tryout. Like, they brought him in to try him out. So, like, Josh Bynes is literally, him and Neville Hewitt are the only names on my list. What names you got on your list at linebacker, Kendall?
The only guys I have are guys with the exact plan you laid out. You got to cut Klein to sign these guys. There's really no reason to sign a linebacker in free agency unless you're cutting Klein and getting the savings. So my idea is cut Klein, get the savings, and then use a fraction of the savings on these guys. The 2 that I've highlighted are Anthony Walker Jr. He was just recently with the Browns, and Camus Grugier-Hill for the Texans. He played pretty well against the Bills this year. I see him as it's funny, he was a converted safety. He's kind of an aggressive linebacker type. He reminds me a lot of Milano. Very good average depth of tackle, very bad missed tackle percentage. He plays a very aggressive play style, will get out of run gaps, stuff like that, but he makes splash plays. So both of these guys, Walker and Hill, they both offer some upside in pass coverage. So if the Bills do want to go into 3 linebacker looks, they could be on the field and still defend the pass. And furthermore, if Edmonds or Milano got hurt, they could fill in a nickel defense with 2 linebackers and still serve decently well in pass coverage in that situation. So that's why I was interested in those two guys. The guy I really want is Kaiir White, but I don't think there's a chance in hell we're paying for him.
Like, that guy's a
He's
starter,
young,
right? Like
he's
that would
young and just had a good season with the Chargers.
That would be a guy like if Matt Milano walked last year,
Yeah.
like you'd want a Kaiir White to go fill that spot.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Chargers, though, the one guy who I do like, we used to play a lot of 3 linebacker, football when we had Lorenzo Alexander and Woso from the Chargers.
He's a good pass rusher.
Pretty penny though. Like, but that's what I'm talking about. Like, he gives you that ability to rush the passer.
Yeah.
You can drop back and cover. Like, I think he's going to cost a pretty penny, but he's always an intriguing name if the Buffalo Bills are looking to go into left field and just do something drastic to, mix up their defense a little bit. But Dave, I don't know, any linebackers you got on your list here?
No, because honestly, even if we cut Klein, I'm not opposed to just not signing anyone. I mean,
just drafting the guy in middle rounds.
I mean, I'm fine with a guy like Andre Smith or Joe Giles Harris filling that void if need be. I mean, the fact of the matter is like Klein is a luxury to have, right? You don't play a ton of base defense. You play a lot of 2 linebacker. And yes, Klein is a nice luxury to have because technically he can come in for either Edmonds or Milano because he's just, he can just fill either void. But again, Tyrell Dodson's there. He's shown some promise. I'm fine with him coming in to take defensive snaps. Actually, he'd probably be the one I would want to come in to take defensive snaps above those other guys. So, honestly, even if we cut AJ Klein, I'm not really that interested in signing a free agent.
Sit on the money and put it elsewhere.
Yeah. I got a hot take here. Chris Jenke comes in and says Joe Giles Harris season. My hot take, it doesn't exactly have to do with free agency. I think Joe Giles Harris has a better chance of making the roster next year than Tyrell Dodson.
But they just re-signed him.
But they also brought Joe Giles Harris back on a futures deal. Like, I understand that they re-signed Tyrell Dodson, but it was to a 1-year training camp deal. Like, nothing's guaranteed for Tyrell Dodson.
Right.
I mean, if you go back to that game where AJ Klein was out with COVID, Tyrell Dodson was one of the reasons why the Patriots were able to run all over us. His run fits were not great. So, if Tyrell Dodson can't step up his ability to play linebacker against the run, I think a guy like Joe Giles Harris can come in, play just as good special teams, and maybe offer you a little bit more. So I wouldn't be surprised if, I'm not going to sit here and bet money on it, but I wouldn't be surprised if, come September 1st, Joe Giles Harris is on the roster and Tyrell Dodson's the name on the waiver wire. Like, it wouldn't shock me. All right, moving on to corner, which is obviously a interesting position here. Levi Wallace looks more attractive every day. To me, like, at first I was like, yeah, let's move on. Let's draft a corner at 25 and let's, reinvent the wheel on defense. And I do think, like, the 2 things that we need to get better on defense, we're a really good defense, right? DVOA is great. We just absolutely skull crush these bottom feeders of the National Football League. But our inability to 2-gap and our inability to have a man versatile like CB2, I think hinders what we can do against some of the more prolific offenses in the National Football League. So the 2 things I think the Buffalo Bills need to improve on is 2-gapping defensive tackles, as Eric laid out in the film room a couple of weeks ago, and finding a cornerback who can do both. And Levi can-ish do both. So, but can you do better than Levi? Yeah. So that's the situation that gets called into play here. So looking at some of these free agents, Dave, I'll start with you. Is there a whale you're chasing at corner to come in here and place next to Trey White? Or are we just looking for a guy to maybe leverage to what we would end up ultimately playing Levi in that $5 to $8 million range?
I think first, I don't know that there's a whale that is worth the Bills signing. I think what you would want to do is look for a guy that would be the equivalent or a little bit better quality player than Levi Wallace, that you're essentially going to pay the same amount of money that it would take to re-sign Levi, or just a little bit more. The 2 guys that I have circled, I think, are both guys that have been covered in the film room. They're Dante Jackson and Sidney Jones. And Sidney Jones is actually the top of my list. And the reason for that is because his age, his fit for the Bills, and his willingness to tackle. And I think he's going to be cheaper than Dante Jackson. So I really like Sidney Jones as a guy that I would go after, and maybe you could get away with paying him $4 to $5 million a year. And then who knows, maybe that allows you then also to bring in another guy in the free agent class at like a 1 on a 1-year deal that you can have in your back pocket that you can bring into training camp, with no guaranteed money, but have a body in there so that it frees you up for the draft. So for me, I don't think there's a whale. I mean, you can consider Dante Jackson a whale. He's probably going to get close. I don't know that he's going to get it, but he might get close to that $10 million a year range. But for me, I'd rather take half of that money and pay Sidney Jones. That's me.
Yeah. You know what I think about, Dante Jackson? I obviously speaking with Eric and Aaron and stuff and Kendall, you could probably speak to this. Like the tape probably doesn't blow you away, but I think it's probably the intangibles that the Buffalo Bills and the athletic profile of Dante Jackson that intrigues the Buffalo Bills. And you look at it, right? Sean McDermott, Leslie Frazier, John Butler, like these guys, I feel like one of these years, like they always scout the corners and they're always looking at the corners that I don't expect them to be looking at. Like they're looking at Tyson Campbell from Georgia. Like, I'm like, what? Like Tyson Campbell from Georgia? Like there's all these crazy good zone corners in the draft and they're looking at Tyson Campbell. Like, so to me, I think one of these years, the Buffalo Bills are going to pull the trigger on this athlete. And if Levi Wallace prices himself out, I think this might be the year. Dante Jackson, he's got speed, right? That speed that we talk about. He's got recovery speed. He gets beat. He can go back and he can catch up to guys. He's explosive. He plays relatively well in zone coverage. Where does he struggle? Tackling, man coverage, etc. But I think the Buffalo Bills believe they can take that ball of clay and they can fix it. And his athletic profile, they can make him do those things that he currently can't do. That's why I think that Dante Jackson might be the number one target for the Bills in all of free agency.
That's fine.
You know what I mean?
I mean, if the difference is like trying to pay Levi Wallace 7-8 million or paying Dante Jackson 9-10 million, I'll take Dante Jackson and his athletic ability over Levi, even though Levi's got the 35-45 games played with the Bills. So you're right on that, because Sidney Jones is more of a from an athletic profile and size standpoint, he's not the biggest guy, right? But Dante Jackson does have that size. I know a lot of people in the comments section have been saying, hey, we need a corner with size. People have mentioned Rasul Douglas. He's a corner with size. Obviously, that would fit well in a zone scheme and coming off a career year. You wonder how the market is going to look at a guy like Rasul Douglas, who wasn't bad, right, prior to Green Bay, but he wasn't the guy that you're going to pay $6 to $8 million a year. So is he a guy that could be on the Bills' radar as well? Another name to mention, just because I think people like the size of Rasul Douglas as well, and his ball skills.
Kendall, what are your thoughts on Sidney Jones? Because I know you broke it on the film room. And what are your thoughts on Rasul Douglas? Because that is the name that was mentioned pretty much in the comment section a couple of times there.
So Sidney Jones is interesting because he is smaller. People will look away from that, ideal CB2 lanky big guy type of archetype. But he's a former second rounder. Like you said, he's young. He's probably going to be a fraction of the cost of Dante Jackson. So that's what's pretty intriguing. When I looked into the stats of him, he actually didn't get targeted a whole bunch. I don't know if that's, just the wonky PFF coverage, primary zone defender assignments, or if that's actually the quarterback isn't looking his way because he's covering his area. I do know, obviously, from film stuff, he does know how to leverage his zones and make sure he's occupying the right spaces and zones to force routes in different directions and force the quarterback's eyes in different directions. So he's intriguing from that regard. Forcing incompletions on low targets is definitely something you look at. He was tied for 11th in zone coverage with 6 forced incompletions, and he was only on 32 targets. So it's pretty impressive from that regard. Rasul Douglas, though, my biggest issue with him is really just that you're paying for 1 year. That's my biggest cause for pause. It's just, what are you paying for? You're really paying for his production of interceptions this year, and the downside is he wasn't all that good until this year. Could that be the scheme that he was in that's somewhat similar to the Bills' defensive coverage schemes? Maybe, but do you really want to bet on that? Because everyone you're getting in free agency, their contract is going to be inflated because it's a bidding war.
And Douglas, you're paying for like what you saw from the splash plays, right?
Yeah.
And we know the Bills, like, I mean, what is the story of the Bills defense been for like the last 4 years since McDermott's been here? It's been like super solid defense, bend but don't break, and no real like what I would call superstars, right? It's a team defense, right? And yes, you have stars in Poyer and White and Hyde, but like by most standards, people would consider the Bills defense elite as a team defense, not because of one or two guys in splash plays. So I agree with you, Kendall. I would rather go after a guy like Sidney Jones. He'd be. I would even go after Jackson. Honestly, I would.
What about his teammate in Seattle, DJ Reed Jr.? Super undersized, but
he's on my list. He's on my list.
I mean, PFF is super high on DJ Reed Jr. Converted safety to corner. They talk about his strengths being run support, physicality, competing at the catch point. Obviously, super undersized guy. I think he's like 5'8",
but he did play mostly on the outside, though.
But he did, despite the fact he's undersized. Yes, he did play mostly outside corner. But they didn't ask him to do a lot of man-to-man stuff in Seattle. So,
and he's a good run defender and a good tackler as well, which is kind of weird for his size, but he is.
You and Kendall, I haven't had a chance to watch the show from last night. You guys mentioned Bryce Callahan, and that name shocked me a little bit.
Yeah,
it shocked me a little bit because
Ant loved him.
And I get the love for Bryce Callahan as a nickel corner. I don't understand the love for Bryce Callahan as an outside corner.
He pulled his tape as an outside corner, and for what it's worth, take PFF coverage grades for what they're worth. He was a third-ranked corner in 2020 where he played primarily outside. Okay. So there is something there, and the tape that he showed, like he is a good player. He has to win in different ways because he's not as tall and he has shorter arms, but he's really sticky. He doesn't allow a lot of separation, and there is something to that. So, and Richard Rush comes in. I mean, Winfield was small. Yeah. I mean, small corners can play on the outside. It's just harder. You have to win in different ways than a longer, bigger corner would. And that honestly gets me on to Ant's other guy that he pointed out last night. And that's Ahkello Witherspoon. Yeah. I'm interested in him from an athleticism and size perspective because he is long, he is tall, and he is fast. Like he can really move. So I'm interested in him. I haven't jumped into the tape a whole lot other than the 3 plays I saw in film room, but I'm definitely interested by him. He's had back-to-back good years. Got more snaps last year than the year before. So, that sample size, even with it going up, he's still showing he can produce with that sample size. So I'm definitely intrigued by him. He's another one of those guys that's in a similar price range as Sidney Jones. And he's going to be 27 at the start of next season.
I agree. But the thing that concerns me about him is he is not good in the run game. He is not a good tackler. And hey, maybe that, like I was joking with Aaron Quinn, I was like, well, maybe that's a fit for the Bills because they haven't seemed to have been too concerned with tackling in some regards. But like, that's where if like I'm looking at Witherspoon and I'm looking at Jones, and I love the athletic profile of Witherspoon.
You'd take Jones because
I would take Jones because of his ability in the run game. I know Witherspoon is probably a better athlete and he's got better size, but for some reason, like I get hung up on like, can guys tackle or not?
No, that's fair. I mean, the Bills value that. They do value that from their outside corners. I mean, they drafted Dane Jackson, who's unbelievable at run fits for an outside corner, and they coached up Levi to be a better tackler than he was when he got to town. So it's clearly something.
Oh, maybe they can coach him up then. Maybe that's an angle.
I mean, maybe it's part of it, but I don't know. Maybe Levi still had that innate ability to run fit.
13 comes in and says, "You willing to pay Levi $8 million AAV? I wouldn't be willing to go over 6. Where do you what would you guys put?"
It's a good number. I'll agree with you. 6. 6
and a half. I posed this a few weeks ago. I forgot what Cover One show it was. I think it was Disguise Coverage. I asked the guys. I was like, if the number is 5 million, what would you do? And that was like their teetering point. They were really struggling, and that's where I was. But the more I look at this class and everything, and obviously the value of continuity and stuff like that, I think 6 million is probably my cap. Just the flexibility part to the draft that Brandon Beane loves. There's value to that. There's value to filling glaring needs in free agency and really going based on your board. Hopefully he doesn't double dip on positions again, but really going based on your board. So I think in a sense you can overpay Levi $6 million to be your CB1 to start the season, and then CB2 right back where he belongs. So Yeah,
8
6
million.
it's rich for my blood, but like I think I'm still willing to do it.
Yeah, $8 million. I want that upside. Like I want that Dante Jackson type of
Right,
upside where a guy can actually
exactly.
feel like be deserving.
And that's the
But I
thing,
think,
like Levi probably produces better.
Mhm.
He's probably better statistically and on tape
yeah,
than Dante Jackson, but it's the ball of clay. It's the athleticism
Yeah.
you're getting from Dante Jackson where it's like, hey, if we coach him up the way we've coached up other guys in this system, what could he be? So that's
Yeah.
the intriguing part.
and Chris Jenke mentioned James Bradbury. There are other names that could be added to this
So many
list.
names, yeah.
We haven't even mentioned Casey Hayward.
That
Steven
was
Nix.
actually that's my favorite one of this group.
Yeah.
It's getting Casey Hayward and drafting a young guy.
Steven Nelson from the Eagles.
People loved
is
Steven
available.
Nelson last year. I mean,
I wanted him.
He actually wasn't even bad, honestly, statistically. I mean,
this guy's got injury issues, but if we're looking to get a little bit more man-to-manny, Robert Alford from the Cardinals has always impressed me when he can stay on the field. You could get Patrick Peterson and Joe Hayden, no thanks, because they're on their last legs.
Yeah.
Kyle Fuller as a reclamation project. Mike Hughes showed he's a capable CB2.
I like Mike Hughes.
In certain, like you'd have to mask him a little bit, but it's not the end of the world if you're saving $4 million and drafting a guy. Xavier Rhodes, Fabian Moreau. I mean, there are just names upon names upon names, and knowing what the Buffalo Bills can do at CB and how they can coach him up, like go out there, get your veteran, draft a guy. If you get a Dante Jackson, you might not have to draft a guy, right? Like you can be okay with, I realized when I said it how stupid it sounded.
I liked it.
But like I didn't even look at like the depth guys. Like I like Darius Phillips as like a CB4, but like
this is another one. Jason Verrett, like that's a guy. Obviously, the injury concerns.
Very man-to-man heavy though. Man-to-man.
But that's something that man-to-man. It helps, change the defense.
Yeah.
It allows us to be able to play man a little bit more than maybe we could or wanted to last year. And he may be cheaper because of the injury pass. And we've seen Brandon Beane go in on guys like that. Wasn't Kevin Johnson injured the season before we signed him, so we got him cheaper than otherwise?
I wouldn't be opposed to giving Jason Verrett like a $3 million contract with like no guarantees. Let him come to camp. And if he makes the team, then great. If he doesn't, no harm, right? Like, I mean, the thing he has to, he's got to have to look himself in the mirror and realize that like his injury history is going to catch up to him. He made $5.5 million last year. He's not going to come close to that, I don't think, in 2022. So if you're talking about like, okay, we're not going to pay you 5.5 because your injury history and you're 30 years old, but we could give you 2.5 to come in to camp and maybe win a job, like to start.
That's where it's intriguing because there's upside there.
All right, moving on to safety. I have one name on my list, and here's the thing about safety, right? Like Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, they're entrenched. I don't think we're looking for a Raphael Bush, so we're not looking for a guy who's pushing 30. There's some really cool young safeties like Jesse Bates and Marcus Williams in this free agency class, but like we're obviously not interested. The only name I have on my list is Malik Hooker of the Cowboys. Maybe you get him
just popped off the screen at me.
Like a 2-year deal, right? Like that former first round pick. He's decent. He's athletic. He shows up in run support. Are there things about his game that could be fixed? Yeah, but he's like that athlete, right? So he's like a younger guy you might be able to get in here in a 2-year deal and sort of transition. Deshaun Elliott of the Ravens was another guy that I kind of like. But again, it's like just draft a guy in the middle rounds and, bank on the development of Josh Thomas, bank on the development of Damar Hamlin. I think Jaquan Johnson is pretty much he's special teams only at this point. I don't know if there's much defensive ability out there. Dean Marlowe is sitting out there, but again, why? Like,
exactly. That point,
a couple of guys
devote to development.
I mean, my view.
Are there any safeties that stick out to you guys?
Oh, my view on safety is the same as it was for linebacker, right? Like you have all these guys under contract. You just drafted. I mean, I know it was a late draft pick, but you drafted Damar Hamlin. You've made the continuous sort of investment in Jaquan Johnson by keeping him on the roster every year since his rookie year. They've had him. You've got Josh Thomas there, sort of waiting in the wings, if you will. I don't think this is a position that needs to be addressed whatsoever in free agency.
I agree.
What do you think, Kendall? Yeah,
there's not much there. Like, there's a ton of young guys that are intriguing, but it's like just draft and develop. Like we've already drafted Jaquan Johnson and Damar Hamlin. Just develop them now. I don't even know if Johnson's going to be re-signed because obviously it would be a similar type of Saran Neal type deal, probably not as expensive, but it would be a similar special teams only type of deal. So I don't even know if they're going to go down that road. So that's why I kind of lean more towards get a guy on the cheap in the draft if you're trying to add.
I'm straight up blanking here. Jaquan Johnson's a free agent?
No,
I don't think he is.
No.
I thought you said re-sign Johnson like he was.
I was saying like hypothetically after this season. Like I don't know if he's coming back.
All right, I was like,
after
am I losing my mind?
No.
So Eric K comes in, and this was to say there's a ton of dudes in late in the draft that I like to. Reed Blankenship finally is finally declared for the draft.
What is he, like 30 years old by now?
Bubba Bolden is a guy. Manny D has that relationship with Sean McDermott, played a role in us drafting. Gregory Rousseau. Bubba Bolden was that highly sought after high school recruit, went to USC, transferred to Miami, sort of a ball of clay late. Verone McKinley from Oregon is a guy that, you know how much I love my Oregon DBs. He's a guy. So a ton of guys late in the draft, and we'll be getting into that next week when we start talking combine. Last but not least, punters. They all suck in free agency. None of them are good. I'm going to say this every show from now until draft day. I'm going to make a point to find a point in the show to say this. Matt Arazia from San Diego State. That's for the boy lettuce. Jake Camarda from Georgia. Jordan Stout from Penn State. Ryan Stonehouse from Colorado State. All four of these guys, to me, are draftable punters. Use a 6th-round pick. Go get your Tyler Bass of punters this year. Like, for the love of God. I know there's some people like, don't draft the punter. That's so dumb. I don't. Use your 6th-round pick and go get yourself your punter for the next 4 years.
You should.
Maybe 8 years.
If you keep all your picks, you have 2 6s and 2 7s. Why not?
Yeah. Take a punter in the 6th round.
Yeah.
All right. Let the Patriots draft a white supremacist punter. And then you, 10 picks later, can grab your punter. That's way better. And it doesn't get cut.
Judge, have you heard of Ryan Wright from Tulane?
I've heard of him. I haven't done any research into him. The 4 guys that I've zeroed in on are, as I mentioned, Arazia, Camarda, Stout, and Stonehouse. But,
do yourself a favor and look into him later. I charted a Tulane game earlier this season, and I was like, "Holy shit! I found our new punter." So he's someone.
Can
he's someone
he
I
hold?
No clue.
Yo,
no idea.
And that's the thing
I know
too,
that's
right?
supremely important, but I have no clue.
It's crazy too, right? So I've never gone down the rabbit hole on punters this much before.
Why would you?
Arazia from
Brian Mormon.
Arazia from San Diego State was also their kicker. Very few holds. No. Jordan Stout for Penn State has been kicking too. So we don't he wasn't always their kicker, so he's got a history of holds. But last year he was their kicker and their punter. So it's but Stonehouse was kicking the shit out of the football at the Shrine game.
What a great name too.
Everyone.
Hey, that Utah State game I went to scout live. He was booming the ball. I mean, Colorado State can't really play offense worth the damn, but he was booming it.
For any part of my take fans out there, Ryan Stonehouse also looks like PFT commenter. Like he straight up is just kind of like a gingery dude. Like I love me some Ryan Stonehouse. And he's a small guy, like 5'10", 185, but he just
rail thin.
Yeah, but he makes it work. Anyway, we got what do we got on tap here? We got the snake draft on tap here. So what we're gonna do is the same thing we did last time. We're gonna make a few tweaks to it, right? So after some feedback, we're gonna make some tweaks to our snake draft. It's gonna be 3-round snake draft today of free agents, and we're each getting $15 million to play with. So we're gonna do a snake draft. We can take any position we want. I can take 3 defensive tackles if I want. Dave can take 3 edges if he wants, whatever you want. We get to pick 3 players, but we got to make it work for under $15 million. And re-signing guys like Jerry Hughes, Harrison Phillips, and Levi Wallace are on the table. So if we're doing a snake draft in the first round, Dave takes Dante Jackson, Kendall takes Sidney Jones, and I'm like, I might just re-sign Levi Wallace. Like that might be the route I take. Your boy Lettuce says maybe teach Saran Neal how to hold. Get the backup quarterback to do it. Oh, wait, we don't have a backup quarterback. Anyway.
And we are going to try to keep it. We're not going to be like, oh, we're going to get Levi Wallace for $1 million. Like, it's not
we're going to be.
I might even overinflate my contracts.
We're going to be realistic here. I'm going to take the approach of kicking money down the road and get maybe like an $8 million AAV guy getting him for 6 in the first year by kicking some money into the later years of the contract, non-guaranteed. So I'm gonna cheat a little bit, but
I am not gonna cheat.
I got
am
so
gonna use a
thoroughly-
strict AAV model. That's
I
all
got
I'm
and
doing.
I'll
so
overinflate.
thoroughly-
This is perfect. I'll overinflate. That way I will over account for how much they
I
actually
got
cost.
so thoroughly beat down by the last draft that my ego needs to win this one because Dave so thoroughly crushed me in the last one because I got a little too Washington Commander centric. Kendall, since we didn't decide for the show, I'm gonna let you pick the order that we go in. So you pick the order, Kendall. Whatever order you want.
Oh, I wish
You
I
pick
had,
the
like, an
order.
RNG thing just to randomize
No,
it.
who do you like the most or who do you like the least? Is
Oh,
essentially the order we're gonna
don't
do.
frame it like that. How dare you? I'm
Remember,
picking
it's
Tilt
snakes.
now.
I'm
Tilt's
first?
going first. It's Snake. Ooh, this is huge for me. I want to go second.
So who's going first?
It's
Me,
Tilt.
I guess.
It's Tilt
Okay,
going first because you
alright.
put this on me.
Sweet. I wanted to go third anyway, so you're good.
Okay. Well, I gotta back up my talk, right? And I gotta go with the guy that I had tops of my cornerback list. I'm going to go with Sidney Jones with my first pick we'll call it a $4 to $5 million AAV. So 4 or 5. We'll see how the rest of the draft goes. But I'm going to go with Sidney Jones with my first pick.
All right. So Sidney Jones off the board, the new CB2 of the Buffalo Bills. People in the comment section, let us know how you'd feel if Sidney Jones was CB2 of the Buffalo Bills. First day of free agency, Buffalo Bills signed Sidney Jones. Let us know how you'd feel. Kendall, you're up. Where are you going here?
I'm taking the approach that the Bills should take, and they should prioritize Mr. Harrison Phillips. So he's my first priority. I'm taking Harrison Phillips. SpotTrack has him at 5.4 AAV, so I will overinflate to 6.
What a guy.
Never know what's going to happen out there. We're going to give him 6. Maybe there's a bidding war on him, and we'll see what I can do with the remaining $9 million.
All right. I'm up and I get my 2 picks, and I'm going to cheat like a motherfucker. I'm going to start by going and getting my ball of clay, Dante Jackson.
Fair.
And I am going to count him 6 mil AAV.
No,
listen,
no, I'm not letting you do
it.
that.
First
You got
year and a half or 8.
Split the difference. 8 million.
You're
8 million.
telling me you can't construct a contract to where you can get him for 16 million in the first year.
Call Greg. I know he's on vacation.
I'm not telling you that.
Greg on the salary cap show said 6 years 18 or said 3 years 18 million.
Did he?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
Interesting.
I think that's a low ball, but that's
I'm going.
I think it is too. I think he'll command
6
more on
million.
open
I'm
market.
getting Dante Jackson off the injury, so I'm gonna.
I
go
hope
6
Twitter
million.
comes after you and they're like, never fucking
hope so.
happening.
I hope so, dude. Twitter has not been my best friend lately.
Oh, you're
every time
telling
I post
me.
something, you know.
That's great.
And then I'm gonna follow it up with a 2-gapping defensive tackle, Derek Nottie. I'm gonna get him 5 mil. I'm gonna get him 5 mil AAV to come in and apparently replace Harrison Phillips because he's gone. So Derek Nottie of the Kansas City Chiefs. So I'm going with Dante Jackson at corner and Derek Nottie at defensive tackle.
How much do you have left?
I have $4 million.
You could do something with that.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So, do I want an edge guy? This is unbelievable. Mine's going to be the most realistic, and everyone's going to hate me. I'm taking Jerry.
I don't hate it, actually.
No, I know you guys.
What's your AAV for Jerry?
I don't know. If I'm overinflating, I think PFF is overinflating too much. And I'm 6 down for Phillips. So let's put him at like 4.5. No, let's put him at 5. That way I have 4 mil left, right?
I was going to take Jerry Hughes in my last pick for 4 mil, so you're fine.
All right. Well, we're perfect. Then Jerry Hughes for 5 million.
Dude, I'm telling you right now, some of those PFF
cheaper.
some of those PFF contracts are going to be silly. Like they're going to look foolish. Like they have like Rashad Penny for $2 million. I'm sorry. The fuck?
No, not a chance. Yeah, not a chance.
What?
I mean, running backs are undervalued, but he
was the best running back in the league the last month of the season.
Someone's he's young and he just balled out at the tail end of the season. Someone's gonna pay him something.
All right, so Kendall's got Harrison Phillips, Jerry Hughes, otherwise known as the 2021 Buffalo Bills. Dave, who are you adding to Sidney Jones here?
Okay. I'm gonna go. This is tough because I could make a case that Sidney Jones at a 4 million AAV, and now there's no way Agba's going to go for less than 11 million, right? Like, there's just no way.
Mhm.
What were you gonna get?
I was gonna say Agba at like 10 million AAV, and then go with like a vet min defensive tackle, but I don't know if that's realistic. I think Agba is going to get over. I think he's going to get over 10 million AAV. What do you guys think?
I think you're probably right.
I think he's going to get 12.
Over. Yeah.
All right. So then in that case, I will go a different direction, and I will take, since I did not re-sign Harrison Phillips, I will take Daquan Jones, defensive tackle, at a $4 million AAV with my next pick. So I think that leaves me about 5 or 6 million left.
Yeah. Because you had Sidney Jones for what, 5?
4 or 5, and then Daquan for 4 or 5.
You got 6 million to play with here.
Oof,
okay.
That's nice.
Yep. And so
that might be Melvin Ingram money.
And hey, stealing my thunder, man. You're stealing my thunder.
I've already taken an edge. I took Jerry.
I am going with Melvin Ingram on a $6 million.
You're gonna win again, damn it.
With the last pick. So I've got Sidney Jones. People are not gonna like that I didn't go for re-signing the Bills players and going.
Hey, but I took them all.
Yeah, that's true. So I got Sidney Jones, Daquan Jones, and Melvin Ingram are my 3.
All right. So Dave concludes his draft with Sidney Jones, Daquan Jones, Melvin Ingram, Kendall. You got Jerry Hughes, Harrison Phillips. You can go Levi Wallace here?
So that's literally what Pops Mafia just said. Take Levi last. And I was thinking that, but I don't think there's a chance in hell Levi goes for 4 mil. I really don't. No. I think he had too good of a season.
You could get him for 4 mil if that's but that's what I'm saying. First year of the contract, right? Like you could probably structure the contract to where it's a cap hit of 4 mil in the first year.
I don't feel like going through explaining that on Twitter though. I'm just going to say a kilo Witherspoon for 4 mil.
Right. I like that. Love it, Kendall. Good one.
Thank you.
Good pick.
I'm writing that down so I can make the graphic. And then I'm going to go 3 newbies. I'm going to go. You guys know I have a history of having an inability to pronounce names on this show. So get ready for this one. Obo Akarankawu of the LA Rams.
Yeah. Agbonia Aku. I don't know his last name. It's Agbonia. His name is Agbonia. Okay.
But on NFL.com, it's Obo, which I like. So
really?
We're taking Obo, OBO, right? Obo.
I'll take
That's what it is on NFL.com. I'm going to go Obu Akarankawu of the LA Rams. Burst and quickness off the edge, can challenge on the edge as a pass rusher. Not a terrible run defender, even though he's played more from the linebacker position there. He'd obviously be transitioning to like DE4 with the Buffalo Bills. Mm-hmm. Not the most powerful guy in the world, hasn't played a full-time role, but he fits into that rotation, gives you a little pass rush pop. So I'm going to go with my boy Obo here that I just learned of really this afternoon. That I've done some digging and some research. So I'm going to go with Obu Okranhu here on a $3 million deal for $3 million AAV, which gives me an extra $1 million to re-sign F.A. Obata. But, you know.
No, it doesn't, because Dante Jackson's going to get $7 million.
All right, we're gonna after the fact bump Dante Jackson.
No, let's see. I think what we should do for the combination of 3 guys we all just picked, we should see when they actually get signed, just based purely on AAV.
Yeah.
Who was the closest to 15 without going?
But here's the thing: AAV. I understand the concept of AAV, but if a guy gets $6 million first year AAV and $8 million or $6 million the first year and $8 million the second year, that's $7 million AAV.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm going for how much. What I was going for, and maybe I explained this terribly, was how much they'll get paid in the first year of the contract.
No,
I
fully understood what you were going for, but I think just for the ease of calculation, we were leaning towards.
But then it's no fun because you can't sign as many good players.
This ain't Madden.
I am Jeff Ireland, and I forgot the actual name of the GM in New Orleans. I'm Les Snead.
Mickey Loomis.
Yeah, there we go. Mickey Loomis. I'm Mickey Loomis. I'm doing some Mickey Loomis.
Or is he the owner? I can't remember.
Actually, it might be the owner.
I think he's the owner.
I don't even know.
So my question with this is, who the hell signed Levi Wallace and for how much? Because no one took him.
We'll say Levi went for $8 million, I guess.
too rich for our blood.
Mickey Loomis is the owner.
Mickey Loomis
or
still
no,
owns
the
it.
GM. The GM.
Oh, he is the GM.
It's
All right.
the Benson family is the owner.
That's right. All
I
right.
think
So I
he's
was
dead.
right. All right. Cool.
Levi Wallace goes to the
Pittsburgh Steelers.
New England Patriots
Oh God,
to replace J.C. Jackson.
that'd be
No, he goes to
funny.
the
I
Steelers to
wouldn't like
replace
that,
Achilleo Witherspoon because Kendall signed him.
That's a good point. Like, who wants?
Or he could go to
Levi
Seattle.
Wallace?
He could go to Seattle because their entire secondary is basically free agents. They're going to need
Yeah.
a zone heavy type corner. When
That's actually
Reid,
actually a really good point. How much cap space do they have?
I don't know, but with Reid and Jones probably leaving, they're going to need a
No.
corner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Apparently, Stephen A. Smith today asked if Josh Allen is an elite quarterback. So yeah, if I was doing a Jabroni of the week this week, which I got none of,
Oh, it's the off season, man.
I guess my Jabroni of the week is Putin, right? Like, come on, that's
I mean,
depressing
yeah,
That's fair.
that's fair. That's
Only
totally fair.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we walked through every position on defense here. We did a fun little snake draft, and that should just about do it for this evening right here at the hour and a half mark of the Air Raid Hour. We're gonna be back next week. Combine. It's a go. So the bubble has bursted and they will have a full combine. So we'll be breaking down all the news and notes of the combine on Monday. We'll be breaking down all the news and notes of the combine on Thursday, and then we'll be recapping everything from the combine next Monday. So our next 3 shows are really going to be draft centric, draft heavy, unless any news breaks. We're really going to dig into the combine. We can start filling in some RAS scores. We could start looking for Bills archetypes and some things that might stick out to the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, the rumor mill starts swirling once you get to Indy and things of that nature. So the next 3 shows will be combine centric. And then when we come back, 4 shows from now, it'll be literally the show that is the day of the beginning of the tampering period. Mm-hmm. So that'll be our last free agent roundup where we'll maybe start having some rumors come in. We might have some re-signings by then. We might have some guys who Brandon Beane confirm are going to test the market by then. We might have some RFA news by then, who they're going to tender, who they're not going to tender. Probably going to have a ton of guys cut from other teams by then. So we'll have a whole bunch of stuff that we can talk about on that show. And then perfect timing, right? Like our Thursday show, 5 shows from now, man, this is the most organized I've ever been in my entire life. Is like the day after free agency. So obviously Greg and Aaron and Anthony get the same day coverage of the opening of free agency, but we'll get day 2. We will get day 2 of free agency on that Thursday show. So it is someone's a fan of Putin in the comment section, apparently. Cool. That's interesting. But we got it all for you here on this Bills centric, non-political air raid hour. Last time I mentioned Putin and white supremacy in a show. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, any final thoughts here, gentlemen, before we head out?
Get the names. Get the spelling of the names right on the graphic, please.
That's big. That's
one
huge.
thing. I'm gonna have to triple check that one that I drafted.
Achilleo Witherspoon, there's an H in there. Just so you know.
I know
it's spelled Damian. You spelled Damian Williams' name wrong.
One time I mess up a graphic and I get blamed for it. I can't pronounce names. I can't spell names. It is what it is. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.